This is an oxygen or O2 sensor. When this goes bad, it can lead to a number of performance-related issues with your vehicle, as well as decreased gas mileage, and it can even ruin your catalytic converter. So today we're going to go ahead and talk about what the purpose of an O2 sensor is, the signs and symptoms of a bad O2 sensor, and help give you a couple tips on how to diagnose whether or not it is your oxygen sensor that's going bad. So the whole purpose of these sensors is to measure the amount of unburnt oxygen within your exhaust system. So you typically have two of them on a normal vehicle. You have one that sits before the catalytic converter and the other that sits after the catalytic converter. And what they do is they read oxygen levels before it passes through the catalytic converter and then after the catalytic converter to measure the mixture of air to fuel and therefore adjust the amount of fuel that's being sent into the engine. The whole purpose is basically to help your engine operate efficiently. What happens is if you have a lot of unburnt oxygen within your exhaust system, that tells the vehicle to go ahead and supply more fuel to the engine, so then that fuel can ignite the oxygen and result in the optimal amount of unburnt oxygen within the exhaust system. So it's all about helping your engine run efficiently and make sure your air to fuel ratios are proper. Most cars with one exhaust system or one catalytic converter will just have two of these, but some cars will have four and some might even have more than that. For example, our BMWs, since they are twin turbocharged, have two downpipes and therefore two catalytic converters, and so we have four of these. When one of these things goes bad, one of the most common things that it does is causes your air to fuel ratios to be thrown off, which then leads to a number of performance related problems. So talking about signs and symptoms of a bad oxygen sensor, you're going to notice things like rough idling, cylinder misfires, acceleration issues, or loss of power. Those are pretty generic problems that can come from a lot of other things like bad spark plugs or bad ignition coils. So the two symptoms that you'll also want to watch out for are going to be decreased gas mileage as well as a bad smell coming from the exhaust system. Your exhaust gas will typically smell a little bit more fuel-y because your fueling system is going to send more fuel into the engine when one of these goes bad, which then is going to result in more fuel within your exhaust gases. The easiest way to diagnose a bad oxygen sensor is through engine codes. Now, this can get a little bit difficult sometimes because you don't always get an error code specifically for the oxygen sensor. The oxygen sensors do have their own error codes, and when one of them has completely failed or has significantly weakened, you will get an error code for the oxygen sensor, but they can become a problem sooner than that. This is one that came off of one of our vehicles. It's got a lot of oil coated on it and it's very burned up as well. And so this oxygen sensor has kind of been slowly failing or weakening over time. They don't always fail right away and give you the error code to let you know that they do fail. Additionally, you're gonna get a lot of fault codes for the other symptoms and problems that this leads to, like your cylinder misfires. So first of all, starting with some of these more generic codes, you might get P0300 codes for cylinder misfires. You might get P0171 or P0175, which is for your engine running either lean or rich. You can get P0173, which is a fuel trim malfunction, or you can get P0420, which would indicate a bad catalytic converter. There are also a number of other codes that you can get because a lot of these symptoms are things that can be caused by vacuum leaks or bad or faulty sensors, again, spark plugs, ignition coils, and anything related to those systems. You're going to want to keep an eye out for your oxygen sensor specific engine codes, and those are going to be P0130 to P0160. And those are specifically reserved to your O2 sensors. So the majority of the time that one of those codes is present, it is going to mean that your oxygen sensor is bad. So diagnosing this problem is extremely easy if you have a P0130 or a P0160 engine code that's specifically telling you that your oxygen sensor is bad. There is one other thing that could cause you to be getting bad O2 sensor codes, but have them not actually be bad, and that could be having a bad catalytic converter. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So the question is, if you aren't getting an engine code for the O2 sensors, how do you diagnose if it is actually the O2 sensors? The best way to do this is to be on the lookout for your gas mileage. You will have a noticeable decrease in gas mileage when one of these goes bad, and you will notice some type of smell coming from the exhaust system as well. So that's one thing, but you'll also want to keep an eye out for any engine codes that you're getting with respect to running lean. When these O2 sensors start to weaken, they'll cause the vehicle to run lean. And so if you're getting a P0171 engine code indicating that you're running lean, that could be a good sign that your O2 sensor's on the way out the door. As I mentioned at the beginning, replacing these is important because it can eventually burn through your catalytic converter. Because these things control fueling, what happens is when your readings are off and one of them goes bad, it ultimately leads to the fueling system dumping more fuel into the engine. And if you have too much fuel within the engine, that can lead to unburnt fuel getting inside your exhaust system. And what happens is that fuel will then ignite within your exhaust system, and it can then cause your catalytic converter to either clog up by burning through the mesh screen, or it can cause it to get completely hollowed out. And if your catalytic converter goes bad, you're definitely going to get engine codes for a bad oxygen sensor. Catalytic converters use rare earth metals on the inside, and so they are very expensive to replace when they do go bad. Anyways, guys, that covers it for our video on bad oxygen sensors. Hopefully this was able to give you a little bit of insight into what to look for if you think your oxygen sensor might be going bad, as well as helped you diagnose whether or not it is the oxygen sensor. If you appreciate this video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for future videos.